All right. Today we are going to talk about Azure virtual machines and how we create a virtual machine. What are the different options we have while creating the virtual machine? And so far, what we have learned is we learn how we can set up the organization in the cloud with the Azure AD and how you can start onboarding the subscriptions. What are the different types of subscriptions we have? And how do you buy a subscription and what is the resources hierarchy and what is the management group and what are the best practices to set up the management groups and subscriptions. And we also started learning about the outages at Microsoft. If you deploy your infrastructure on the Microsoft Azure platform, um, what are the different situations where your services might be down and how you can overcome such problems. That is what we have discussed in the last session as well. So today we will talk about VM creation. So VM creation is pretty straightforward, and if you just go to the Microsoft documentation, you will find the information about this. So just simply, if you search like how to create a Azure VM, you get a good amount of documentation about it, right? You see, you can create a virtual machine through Azure portal. So it has all the steps that you needed to follow to create a virtual machine. And you can create a virtual machine with the PowerShell, Terraform, Bicep, ARN templates, and you can even use the CLI commands. If you're a beginner, you don't know how to get started, this is the place where you can start, research or looking into it. Okay. So, but what else we are going to learn? It's pretty straightforward and you can learn, right? So what we are going to discuss is before we start deploying the infrastructure, why do we need to build the infrastructure in the first place? What is the usual requirement? What will be the business use case? Okay. And what are the dependency components to create a virtual machine? And once you create a virtual machine, what you're going to do next? So it's creating virtual machine is it may not be a simple a task, right? I mean it's not a only requirement, right? There could be other requirements in the enterprise environment. So why we need to create a virtual machine, and while creating a virtual machine, you will come across various options. What are the best practices we have to follow? That is what the major focus for today. Okay, so let us say the virtual machine, why we need to create a virtual machine is a requirement. So if you follow the previous sessions, the previous recording, you might have understand the business has a different requirements. So could be you are into product development organization, you have a couple of products which you want to deliver to your end customers. Okay, the products, let's say you have a product one or product two. All right, there can be multiple products. So end of the day, these products you wanted to make sure these products are available to your end customer. Okay, and maybe they are very new products where you want to get started in the cloud environment. Probably these products are there in the on-premises environment for quite long time. Maybe the products are applications running on the VMware environment or Hyper-V environment or Citrix or any other public clouds, right? Probably you want to migrate them to the Azure, maybe you want to deploy directly on the cloud environment. There can be various use cases. So end of the day, why we create the infrastructure is to deploy some components inside, which can be useful for your internal business or internal organization or outside customers. You have customers where they are going to consume your products or applications. So I will tell an example. So I have a website which is like www.pvhitsolutions.com. Okay, so this is the website I have. So in this website, in future, right now it is just a website, has having information about my company and all the details. But in future, if I wanted to provide the free materials to my students, where they can sign up for this website and get the free videos, free documents, anything, right? Maybe sometime they want to get some vouchers, various things if they want to get it, right? I want to host a platform. I want to have a platform where this website can run. right? That is where I have decided to go with the infrastructure as service component. And within the infrastructure as service component, I am going to deploy my website. Okay, to deploy this website, so I need to have a server because I cannot keep this website or code in the client operating system. That's why I need a Windows Server operating system, or could be Linux operating system as well. So that's the reason I'm going to have a VM created in the cloud. This is one of the use cases. There could be various other use cases which you come across. Okay, the primary reason to host the web VM or create a VM is to host an application or to host a service or to host a website, right? Any product, we call it as a product. You are going to host something in this virtual machine. If it is a Windows server, probably you might use IaaS service because it's one of the role by default available in the Windows Server operating system. All right, inside this Windows Server, you're going to install IaaS. Probably you copy your code from your website, whatever you developed, you push the code to the server, and then you ensure that this server is highly available and accessible. The website is accessible to the end users. Okay, so now my goal is going to fulfill by creating the virtual machine and connecting to the virtual machine and installing the IaaS and configuring my application or website inside the server. Then I can access this by creating a public IP for this machine. Okay, and having certain rules allowed in the NSG like HTTP or HTTPS. Okay, and with this I can access my website over the internet. But this is not the usual use case, right? So we want to have a security in place. Okay, we want to have the let's say high availability in place. We talked about the situations where virtual machines may not be available for certain reasons. So you need to think about high availability, right, for your virtual machine. And in case this server is compromised by any hacker, maybe it is hit by ransomware attack, you need to have a solution where you can actually retain from the backup, right? So we will talk about, we need to have a backup solution in place. And you can also, let's say this is in a, let's say one of the Azure region. In case if the region is down, you need to ensure that high availability in place. If one region is down, you have a situation to, you have a solution to move this VM or fail over the service to another region, so that my users will not be impacted much. So we have a service called ASR, Azure Site Recovery, which will be configuring to for your virtual machine to provide service availability during the regional level outages, right? And as part of the security best practices, we always have to ensure that the servers are patched, or latest updates are installed on the servers on a timely manner. So we might have to look at the solution for the updates for your virtual machine. All right. So we talked about high availability, we talked about security, with respect to the allowing ports, denying the public IP access, uh, business continuity disaster recovery solutions such as backup and ASR, and security patches with the update manager, right? So this is like core fundamental components of your virtual machine. Just creating virtual machine may not help you, right? You need to think about all these aspects when you're creating your virtual machines. All right. And also, while creating virtual machine, right, this is only one virtual machine. For just for the sake of example, taken one example, but in the enterprise you might have many virtual machines. Each virtual machine have a specific role that is going to perform. Could be couple of servers which hold the IaaS, couple of servers which hold the Linux with the Apache or Tomcat, couple of servers could be databases, SQL database, Oracle databases. So different servers will be there. When you have many servers, how do you segregate them, right? How do you identify, okay, this service belongs to this product or this application, right? We have to follow certain naming standards, okay? And this naming standards has to be unique across your organization so that you don't see any ambiguity, right? That's about the naming standards. And when you're deploying the virtual machines, okay, if it is a one virtual machine, my team can go and start deploying it. But in case if there are multiple virtual machines, you might be deploying on a day-to-day basis. Maybe, in a weekly, you get a one request where you have to spin up at least 4 to 5 virtual machine to deploy one specific product, right? It's one specific application. So under the pressure, under the more tasks, the team might actually, do perform might do some mistakes. We call it as a human errors. How do you overcome this human errors? By following certain conditions. Let's say adding some policies, Azure policies, and adding some automation in place so that the human errors can be avoided, right? So those kind of things. Let's say how Azure policies are going to help us. So you have certain criteria. Okay, you purchased some discounts from Microsoft with respect to a specific VM size. We call it as Azure reservations at Azure VM, right? So Azure VM reservations. So you have certain reservations, but your team is keep on deploying the VMs with a different SKU. So you can always specify what are the VM size that is allowed to deploy, right? Those kind of things. Maybe your team is always deploying the VMs in a wrong location. So that is not permitted in your organization as per your organization policies. You want to control that errors as well. So Azure policy have such an default policy mechanisms where you can create a policy with a specific location that users can select and deploy it, right? With the Azure automation, be it a PowerShell script, you use it PowerShell script to deploy your virtual machine. Maybe you use Azure ARM templates, Terraform, Bicep, or CLI, whatever the automation tool that you or your organization is familiar, you can start using them to uh, parameterize, reduce the end user options as much as possible so that the human errors can be avoided, right? So before you create virtual machines, you need to keep all these things in mind so that um, you don't see any problems in future. At least we can avoid couple of issues after the VM is created, right? So we need to think about all these things while creating the virtual machine. We have to choose each and every option so that we don't get into any other issues. All right. So, and one of the important thing that you have to remember is choosing the operating system, right? What operating system I have to choose for my application? Is it a Windows or Linux? And who is going to decide this? And uh, to whom you can rely on it, right? So the decision of operating system will be taken by application team and your cloud architecture team. Okay, so at the time of designing this application, in the initial phase, your cloud architecture team and application team will work together, and they will identify for the product one, the otherwise application one. So we have to go with the Windows operating system, and let's say 2016 or 2019, looking at the future growth for the next 10 years or 20 years, whatever the future growth. So they look at and they will provide the measurements, standard procedures. Okay, for the product one, maybe for this website, we can use the Windows server or Linux server. And even Linux, is it a CentOS or Red Hat? So it's going to be specified already. Okay, so we have to be very careful in choosing this. And if you deploy by mistake, you have to delete and recreate it. There's no way to change the operating system once it is created. Okay, so that's about the choosing the operating system and choosing the location and choosing the right resource group, right virtual network is also very, very important. Okay, so once you choose the virtual network and you cannot change it, there's no way to change it. The only option is to recreate the virtual machine, in a different virtual network. So these are the few things that we have to be aware before we start deploying it. So whatever I spoke about is for the virtual machine. And while creating a virtual machine, what do you see basically? Okay, you see a compute part, and you see a storage part, and you see network. So these are the three key things that you have to remember while creating the virtual machines. Okay, so the compute basically specify the VM size. Okay, what should be the VM size, how much RAM I should allocate, and how many CPUs, virtual CPUs, I have to allocate for my virtual machine. These things will be specified in the compute part. And when it comes to the storage, so what is the disk tier? Is it a standard disk or with the HDD, and a standard disk with the SSD, or premium disk with the SSD? Okay, what is a disk type? And this is for the OS disk. And what should be for, do you need any additional disk? We call it as a data disk in Azure platform. So additional disk, how many disks you need, and what should be the size of the disk, and what should be the tier of the disk. That is what you're going to specify it. And when it comes to the network, so your virtual machine will have the network interface card, and network interface card will be associated with the subnet, and the subnet is part of the virtual network. So if I draw this VNet, you will have it, and you'll have the subnet, then you'll have the network interface card, then you will have the VM container. This is how the workflow or hierarchy. Okay, so these all things has to be connected together to make sure that your virtual machine is highly available and your virtual machine is functioning well. If you choose any one of the property these tires wrongly, then you might see some issues. Even once a VM is deployed, in case if there is any one of these platform is down, you might see your virtual machine is going to be down. Okay, so this is about the virtual machine creation, and while creating the virtual machine, you will be seeing all these options, and you should be make sure you should make sure that you choose all the right options. And once a VM is created, you will definitely going to look at the backups. You look at the ASR replications and the patching on a regular basis, and the security with respect to the network security groups and firewall exceptions, and sometimes we say antivirus installation at OS level. So these kind of things comes under security side. Okay, there is one important aspect is the monitoring. So you need to ensure that the server is added to the proper monitoring service. It could be Azure native monitoring solution, which is a log analytics workspace, or could be you have other third-party monitoring solution like Zabbix, or could be Splunk, any other ITSM tools. If you want to integrate, you can integrate them directly. So another important thing is, okay, when for backups, couple of customers might be using the non-native solutions, could be a Commvault or any Veritas backup, any other backup solutions. But in case if you gonna use the Azure native service, native backup solution, which is Azure Recovery Service Vault, you'll be able to choose at the time of VM creation, or probably you can choose them after the VM creation as well. Okay, so yeah, for the DR or AS DR as well, we have other components, other third-party applications which you can also use it. So if example, right, if you go for the Commvault application as a backup, and for the monitoring Zabbix or Splunk, for the security you need to install Sentinel-1 or any other antivirus solution. So which stage you are going to install this, right? When we say that configuring backup, configuring the monitoring, so there should be some agent that has to run inside the machine, right? If it is a Zabbix, there will be a Zabbix agent. If it's a Commvault, there is a Commvault agent. And if it is antivirus, then there's a Sentinel-1 or any other agent that will be installed, right? So these installations can be done in two ways. Okay, one, manually install. You install them manually. Once a VM is created, you log into the server and install these applications by copying them to the locally into the server, install it. Okay, the other one is the automated way. Okay, the automated process can be done in two ways. You can use custom script extension while creating the virtual machine. You have an option called custom script extension. Using this option, you can install this applications automatically into the server. Okay, the other option is use the DSC, PowerShell DSC. So DSC. So basically, this is one of the feature of Azure Automation Account. You can utilize the Azure automation account to install this applications remotely onto the server. Okay, so in this session, what we do, we'll go ahead and create the virtual machine, and we'll try to take RDP to the virtual machine, and we'll try to install IaaS and try to launch the website, simple sample website, which you get it from the IaaS service. Okay, and I will also show you without logging into the server how you can enable IaaS from the Azure portal itself. So once the VM is created, we are going to discuss about each and every property in the next session and how it is going to help you. In case if there is a problem with the virtual machine connectivity and problem with the virtual machine performance issues, what kind of steps we are going to take and how we are going to fix it. Okay. And while creating the virtual machine also, we are going to look at the naming standards and everything. Okay. So I went to the Azure portal, and if you want to start creating the virtual machine, the easiest way is to search virtual machine on the top, and you can just go ahead and click on virtual machines, and you have an option to click on create virtual machine, Azure virtual machines. And this is where you're going to choose the subscription. It's very important to choose the right subscription. So there are many situations, the team, which I've seen in my experience, deployed the VM in a wrong subscription, and later when they try to check, they couldn't find it. So they have to choose the right subscription again, and to find out the server. And it needs some time to move the VM from one subscription to another subscription, a little bit of efforts and time consuming stuff, which might lead to escalations as well, right? So choosing the right subscription is very, very important. Though you are in a hurry, don't make these mistakes. All right. So now the first thing, as you already learned in the previous sessions, there is a hierarchy, right? The resource deployment hierarchy is like you have a subscription, then you have to have a resource group, then you are going to have the resource created. In this case, the resource is virtual machine. So subscription is chosen here. I'm going to create a resource group. And now you tell me what should be the resource group name. Shall I say test RG? Is it best practice in the enterprise environment? No, right? So we have to go with certain standard. I'm assuming this is going to be my web server, the web server, and I'm going to put my all web applications and web servers in this same resource group. So I'm going to say, let's say RG. This is going to be the resource group, and I'm going to deploy this in a east to west location. So let's say location will put in at the end, let's say east to west. Then the this resource group will contain the servers or resources belongs to web applications. So I'm going to say web, okay? And in this resource, this is going to be a production resource group, or let's say test. Let's say this is going to be dev. I'm going to say dev, and this is going to be the resource group one for this web servers. In case if there are, if you want to create another resource group for the web servers, you can say dv-02 in the same location. Okay, and what should be the VM naming standard? So I'm going to say VM hyphen, because I want to just identify this is going to be the virtual machine when you have multiple resources. VM hyphen, obviously East US location, and this is going to be my dev environment. Let's say dev environment, and this is going to be my web 01. Okay, web hyphen 01. This is going to be my web server, and I'm going to deploy in a east-west location. And here again, which location you have to choose while deploying the virtual machine. It's again at the time of initial landing zone preparation in your cloud environment. So this is already being defined. You just need to follow that. So basically it depends on various factors where your customers are located. And at the same time, let's say your customers are US based customers. So you can go with the east to west to central US or west US, right? But why we choose east to west as a primary location or east to west as a location, right? Because east to west might not have many issues. Maybe there could be Microsoft might are going to put more infrastructure. Maybe they are going to expand their network here. Probably there could be some discounts or some offers. These things are also considered when the decision is going to be taken, right? Out of all these regions. Let's say if I go with the West US location, maybe there's a new data center region they have introduced. Probably this might not have all the requirements, that you are going to have in future. So it's better to go with the one which is being used by majority of the customers. And you can also think in other way, if it is being used by majority of the customers, you can go for the other one so that the latencies and things are very less in the other regions. So this will be decided at the time of designing your architecture for your application. Okay. And in case if there is any customer requirement, okay, let's say there's a new customer who want to sign up for the application, and they are from a different region, let's say West Europe or North Europe, then you can specify the location accordingly. So otherwise the standard procedures will be automatically given. Now the next option is availability options, right? So what are the availability options we have, and what is the use of this availability options? So virtual machine scale set, we are not going to talk about it because we are only focusing on the virtual machine. So when it comes to the virtual machine, there are availability zone and availability set. Two options you have it. Okay, and this feature, this option comes under the high availability scenario. You see high availability scenario, and here it is very important to choose the right solution. Okay, let us spend some little bit of time to understand this high availability solutions. Okay, so example, I have my virtual machine running on Azure environment. I'm going to say this is my web server. This is going to be my web VM, and this is running on the Azure data center. So which means in the backend, there is a physical server. Okay, we call it as a node, and this physical server might have the Hyper-V enabled. Okay, and on this physical server, there can be hundreds or thousands of virtual machines of different customers running. Okay, now you have your critical application running. Let's say a website is running. Okay, and this is if it is down, okay, you might lose your customers, right? So why it is going to be down? Because the node is fault. Maybe it's just a degradation happened, maybe some rack is down, there could be some network issues, some are the other reasons, some unexpected downtime or some planned downtime. Okay, if you go to the previous sessions, you'll understand what is the planned maintenance and what is the unexpected downtime. Okay, because of that, if this VM is down, so your application will not be accessible to the user, or your website will not be accessible to the user. So what we think, okay, to provide high availability, let me build another server and have the same website running. So what I generally do, okay, I'll just go ahead and spin up the new machine in Azure, and I will say this is going to be my web VM too. Okay, and even in fact, I'm going to introduce a new service called load balancer, which will distribute the traffic to the backend Azure virtual machines, right? This is going to distribute the traffic to the backend, virtual machines. Whichever the server is available, it's going to process the request. So this is what the assumption initially. Okay, then I was confident that okay, my website will be available in case if one going down, another will be heavily available. Okay, that's what most of the customers do, right? So what happens is all of a sudden your customers complaining that the website is not accessible. So in this case, what we do is you go to Microsoft and say, hey, I have two virtual machines. I'm expecting at least if one VM is down because of issue at Microsoft, I'm expecting other VM is highly available. Then Microsoft review and for those two machines, and they say, okay, the node where these machines are running is down. Then you will be surprised, okay? You don't know whether they are running in the same server or a different server in the backend. So you need to let Microsoft know that you should not run these two machines in the same physical server, because they are created for providing high availability solutions, right? Otherwise, Microsoft, automatic algorithms or, whatever the, intelligence they have, the VMs will be placed maybe in the same server in the backend, a different server in the backend. So you need to have a mechanism to let Microsoft know that these are the high availability servers. You should not keep them in a same node. To do that, Microsoft will ask you, keep two or more VMs in a availability set. Okay, when you're creating the VMs, keep them in a availability set. If you keep them in availability set, okay, their algorithm knows that, okay, these two machines cannot be part of the same physical server. Okay, they have to be in a different rack or a different physical servers in the Azure data center. Okay, that is why that is how Microsoft deploy them in a two different nodes. So if I take the same example, you have a VM1, you have a VM2. So VM1 will be there in a physical server 1 and VM2 will be there in physical server 2. Okay, this is going to be your, let's say, web VM1, and this is going to be your web VM2. All right, and this is going to be the node 1 in the backend, and this is going to be the node 2 in the backend. All right, and and so what happens is, in case if something happened to this physical server, obviously VM1 won't be there, and you have a load balancer in the front face, so it keeps on checking the health of your virtual machines, and whichever is available, it is going to route the traffic. In case if this is not available, the traffic will be routed to the another machine, because the another machine is in different node, which is healthy for at the moment. All right, that's a concept that Microsoft follow in case if you keep the VMs in a availability set. Okay, so the problem here is, another problem. Okay, you think that so now I have taken a right decision by keeping them in a availability set, so that at least one VM will be available. One fine day you have decided you are experiencing again the connectivity issue for your website, and when you go back to Microsoft and they say, hey, so I know that your virtual machines are in a availability set and they are spread across a different nodes, which is good, but unfortunately, what happens is the entire data center where these nodes are running is down. Okay, so let's say this is in a east to west location, right? East to west location you have chosen, and at the time of VM deployment, this is the region, and within the region, your VMs are deployed in a data center 1. Okay, and in the data center 1, you have the two nodes, and the VMs are spread across the different two nodes because they are part of availability set. Microsoft algorithm place them in a different nodes. Probably they might be in a different rack as well in the data center. Okay, because of this entire data center down, okay, at least this one, your two nodes are down and your VMs are down. That's the reason your users are not able to access the application or website. So then you might have think, okay, what can I do in this situations? You might ask for, why data center is down. Microsoft might provide you the RCA, like, okay, there could be some network issues, network outages, switch was down to the, which is connected to this data center, some power supply issue, whatever, whatnot, right? There could be various other issues as well, Uh, so in such scenarios, to provide high availability for your virtual machines, what you generally do, okay, you go ahead and create the VMs in a availability zones. Okay, each region have a 3 availability zone. AV zone 1, okay, AV zone 1, and let's say AV zone 2, okay, and there could be one more AV zone 3. Just assume that this is the one data center in this region. This is the another data center in another same region. This is one region, one data center, right? So which means while creating the VM1, you are going to specify, okay, VM1 or web VM1, go ahead and sit in the availability zone 1. All right, VM1 is going to sit in the availability zone 1, and VM2 is going to VM2 is going to sit in a availability zone 2. So in case if there is a regional, the data center outages, you have the VM from the another data center. We call it from another availability zone. So this is how the high availability which you are going to provide for your virtual machine in case if there is a data center level failure. And there could be another question. Okay, one fine day you realize that, okay, my virtual machine is not accessible. Sorry, my website is not accessible. That is where everything is started. Then you go and check your virtual machine. They are not accessible. Then you go and raise a ticket with Microsoft, and Microsoft says, hey, we have some issue with the entire region. We started with the node failures. Then we decided to go with the availability set. Then we realized there's a data center level failures. Then we decide to go with the different data centers. In case if one data center is down, you have another data center. Now we are talking about the entire region itself down. So that's where there's no other solution that Microsoft can default provide you. You have to think about the disaster recovery solution. That is where you have something called ASR, Azure Site Recovery. In case if this entire region is down, ASR can bring up these VMs into another location automatically. Okay, so that we will talk maybe in upcoming sessions, but that's another solution. If somebody asks you what are the high availability solutions you have, you can just talk about these things: availability set, availability zone, and ASR as a disaster recovery solution. Okay, so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a availability set. So first, let me choose the operating system for my virtual machine. I'm going to use Windows Server 2016. And the security platform, they introduce a trusted launched virtual machines and confidential virtual machine. These are the two features that they introduced. Okay, this is a trusted platform module which is enabled at OS level, but I don't want to go for this. I want to go for the basic level of security for my virtual machines. And here I'm going to choose the image first, Windows Server 2016. And now I'm going to create a new availability set. So when you create availability set, how Microsoft is going to ensure that your VMs are not down, two VMs are not down at the same time because of the fault domain, empty domain. We'll have a detailed discussion about this in upcoming sessions, but right now you can see by default it takes two fault domain. You can go up to three fault domains. When it comes to update domains, it's a 5 by default. You can go up to 20. Okay, so update domains, in simple words, update domains refers to the updates that are happening to the physical servers in the data center, and fault domain refers to the faulty nodes or racks in your data center, in Microsoft data center. So since this is going to be my web servers, right, I'm going to say this is web hyphen AV set. Okay, maybe I can say, okay, if I go with the standard AV set hyphen and web hyphen, so location US hyphen AV set hyphen 01. This should be web, sorry, my bad. Okay, and click OK. Here I'm going to choose the again operating system because we changed, okay, generation to, why it's saying this? Okay, it's not giving an option. If I choose this, all these things are changing automatically. Okay, now at least it has taken. I'm going to say again, AV set here and east to west location and web hyphen 01. Okay, good. So now the VM size come into the picture, right? And just to give some more context about the VM sizes, so these are the images that are available in the marketplace. So whatever you see Windows Server, they are Microsoft products. Microsoft actually uh, developed these images and they're keeping them in the images gallery so that customers can start using it. Similarly, you have Ubuntu as a product and Red Hat as a product. So Red Hat as a company, they create images and they keep them in the Azure gallery. Likewise, there are plenty of other products. Let's say Oracle database. Oracle database as an image available, and there are like Microsoft Dynamics as an image available, SharePoint as an image available. So which means you can just choose those images, and as soon as the VM is created, those applications already configured. Otherwise, if it is SQL Server, right, I have to create a Windows Server operating system VM, and I have to download the SQL application, install the application, configure the application. That's going to take a lot of time. So with this images concept, you are avoiding these delays. right? In case if you have a product and you want to keep the product in the Microsoft gallery so that your customers can start purchasing it, there is a procedure, and you just have to sign up or enroll for that. You can keep your application in the Microsoft gallery, persistent gallery, so that users can start utilizing it directly. Okay, that option also available. So we'll go with this Windows Server 2019. And when it comes to the VM size, if I click on VM size, there are different series of virtual machine sizes. You see D series, V5, V4, B series, E series, um, F series, L series. There are many other, right? So each one have specific use cases. You see the V5 series is the latest generation D family sizes recommended for the general purpose needs. And this is a older version of the D series. And you can see a B series, it's for the full CPU performance. Okay, E series, there is some specification, like, if you need more RAM, then you can go for this. When you expand this, you get VM size and how many CPUs you get it, how much RAM you can expect, and how many data disks you can allocate, and what is the IOPS you get for an overall VM level, input output operations, right? So, and what is the temporary disk that you get it, and what is the estimated cost in the INR it is showing. If you sign up for your subscription in the US dollars, you will see the dollar price in US. Okay, so that's how we can select the VM size, and these VM size again, right? It's all defined in the initial phases. When the application is being onboarded, or when you decide to support an application, then these VM size already been defined. In case if it is a non-application server, let's say it's a internal server, let's say you are deploying a Active Directory server, Active Directory application inside the machine instead of application server, right? So for the Active Directory, so based on number of objects you are going to create in that Active Directory server, how busy it is going to be, based on those considerations, the VM size will be defined, because you need a CPU and RAM. You need to also look at the throughput, which is IOPS, and how many disks you need. You need more disks, then this cannot be the right size. You need more disks, you have to go for the higher size. And each disk has certain, criteria, like, one disk can be up to 32 GB, I believe at the moment. I need to check on that, but 32 into 4, so you can have those many, that much of data you can allocate it. It's all depends on the business requirement, and this will be chosen. If somebody asks you how do you choose the VM size, you cannot answer them, right? You have to understand the requirement first of all. What is your requirement? Then I can suggest you the right VM size. Are you going to deploy an application? Okay, if you're deploying an application, so is your application is required more CPU or memory? Do you know the answer? If you don't know the answer, let's go ahead and deploy application in one of the test server. Let us install the application with the generic VM size, generic CPUs and RAM. Then let us do the performance testing, load testing. Okay, based on that, we'll decide how much CPU is needed, how much RAM is needed. Okay, you can answer this way. That should be taken care. All right. So for now, I'll just go with the default, VM size that has been chosen. The username and password, which is basically a administrator account, you are going to create now. This is the first account that gets created in operating system. I'm going to choose this username, and password is a sample password, which I generally use it. Okay, so this is the password I've chosen. And in case if you forget the password, this is a way to reset the password once VM is created. And if you forget the username, you can create a new username and password as well. But you can also find out what is the username which was given at the time of VM creation by exporting the VM template. I will also show you in the upcoming sessions. So inbound rules, basically this is like how you what ports you want to allow while connecting to the virtual machine. RDP, SSH will say none for now. We'll try to add more in the future in the upcoming sessions. So when it comes to the licensing, licensing is important. In case if you already have a license purchased for your virtual machines, then you can just enable this feature, and later you update your licensing information into the server, so that you will get up to 42% of the cost saving. All right. So that's about the hybrid licensing benefit. Click next. And here, this is what I was saying. So far, we talked about the compute part. Now we are going to talk about the disk part. So on the disk, by default, you see OS disk. OS disk, you don't have an option to choose the size. The size automatically comes based on the VM size you have chosen. Later, you can increase the disk size, OS disk size, but you cannot decrease the any disk size, be it a OS disk or data disk. So increasing the disk size for OS and data disk is allowed at any time, provided that you are ready with the downtime. You have to power up the machine, then you can increase the disk size. All right. Even in fact, you can also change the disk tire as well. So I'll go with the standard HDD, and so that I can save some cost here. Okay. And again, there's standards as well. Should I go with the standard SSD or HDD or premium? It's all defined at the time of architecture design for the application, right? So SSD is solid state drive, which will have a difference from the HDD. The way it write the disk data into the disk, the way it reads the differentiate, and it has more IOPS compared to the HDD based disk. So standard HDD can be for non-critical applications, and standard SSD or premium SSD for the business critical applications. So I'll go with the standard HDD because it's a testing environment. So what we generally see is, when you want to decommission the VM, so the team is going to delete the VM, but it only deletes the compute part, right? It just delete the virtual machine container. So the disk is still aligned, in Azure portal, and your company is being charged for the disk size, the tire. So that's why this option will help you to clean up the disk, as soon as the VM is deleted. It's also important just in case if somebody accidentally delete the VM, you still have the disk of the VM, so that you can create a new VM from the disk and use that data. So I recommend to uncheck it for now and have some process in place, so that in case if the disk has to be deleted, you can just monitor them on a regular basis. And if there are any disks which are not attached and not in use, you can just go ahead and delete them with the confirmation from the respected box. Okay, so by default, whatever the data that you store in Microsoft Azure platform, be it disk or be it Azure storage, that is encrypted by default. We call it as encryption at rest. In case if you want to use your own encryption keys, you can go with the customer managed keys. Okay, if you want to attach any disk, you can go ahead and attach it. So once the VM is created, I will show you how to attach this disk. So networking, so this is where you're going to specify your virtual network information, provide the virtual network address space, and based on this address space, you are going to create number of subnets. Okay, and each subnet will again have an address space derived from the address space of the VNet, and based on this address space, you are going to have a number of IPs allocated for the virtual machines. Okay, and these IPs will not be allocated directly to the virtual machine. They will be allocated to the virtual machine NIC. We call it as network interface card. That NIC will eventually add it to your virtual machine. So we cannot say that the VM is having IP address, private IP address. We have to say always the VM has a NIC, the NIC has a private IP address, because the VM might have more than one network interface card, and each network interface card will have the IP address allocated. Okay, so right now I'm just going with the default values. So we will also discuss how you can actually do the subnetting, and how you can create multiple subnets as well. Okay, so the VM needs a public IP address if you want to connect over the internet. Right now, I'm going to say none. And I also spoke about the NICs, network security group, where you can allow or deny the traffic for your virtual machine. I'm going to say none for now. I will tell you why I have done the none here, because this is going to assign the NIC network security group to the NIC, but we generally recommend to associate the network security group for the subnet level. That's why I say none. So we have other features like xert networking, and we have one more called proximity placement group, which I will be talking in upcoming sessions. That's like to reduce the network latencies, and it's one of the best practice that we have to enable it. And it's not available for all the VM size, only for a specific VM size. In the next session, I'm going to talk about these. Right, so this is about the management, and these are the optional features. You can configure them later as well. So I was talking about the backup, site recovery, and patching. So these things you can select at the time of VM creation, or maybe once a VM is created, you can also enable these features. Okay, and I'm going to say next, and this is where you are going to enable the boot diagnostics and alerts if you want to configure. So I'm going to say none for now. Okay, the reason I'm skipping this video is going very long. I don't want to confuse you guys. Again, I will come back to these steps and I'll try to show you what are these. And the tags plays a very important role in the enterprise cloud environment. We'll also have a discussion about this. So this is how you create a virtual machine. And before you create a virtual machine, you can actually go through this summary of the configuration that you've selected. If you think everything is perfect, then go ahead and create the virtual machine. When you create a virtual machine, it's going to give you the notification here, and it will also start the job. If you go to the deployment, you will see what are the resources it is getting created. Okay, and as I said before, you create a virtual machine, just go through this and try to understand at a high level what is needed, and then you can start deploying the virtual machine. Okay, in the next session, I'm going to talk about in detail about each and every property on the virtual machine. We'll try to configure backup, we'll try to configure ASR, monitoring, patching, and we'll also talk about network security groups, and why we need to have a network security groups in place, and why we cannot have the public IP address, what are the different connectivity methods we have. So those things we'll be discussing, and um, once all these things, the circle is completed, then we'll go for the new topic. All right. We'll also talk about this automation, Azure policies, and all these things in the upcoming sessions. All right, everybody. Before I end the session today, any questions, Karthik?
Yeah, Kamal. So I have a question. I think so like when it comes to availability, so I think we can only choose either availability set or availability zone, but we cannot choose both options, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's obviously true. If you look at this, right, you cannot. Availability zone concept is entirely different from availability set. You cannot choose both.
right, makes sense. Yep.
Yeah. Um, any other questions, Karthik?
Yeah, and what is the recommended size for iOS web servers in general? Like,
In general, again, it depends on how many users are going to access, right?
uh,
So we
yeah,
cannot say that's what, right? If you ask me, if anybody asks me, I cannot say that. I need the values, right? I say, okay, let's go with the general purpose, okay, where you get 8 CPUs and 32 GB RAM. But what if you have less number of requests, right? Only internal applications are being used. Maybe, maybe it's an application server, um, and it is being used by your internal team, let's say around 100 users. They occasionally access it. So maybe two VCPs are enough, 8 GB RAM enough, maybe 4 GB RAM is enough, but I'm choosing this. It's going to incur you more cost, right? I don't want to give any answers like this, right? I want to have a data in place. First, let's capture the data, review the data. If you don't know what is required from application side, okay, let us implement it with the general size. Let's say we'll go with the two vCPUs and 7 GB of RAM, least one, okay, where you get less cost. Then we'll do the testing. We'll look at the data for last 7 days, 15 days, 1 month. We cannot go with the last 7 days also, last 15 days also. The recommended review of the performance metrics would be at least a minimum of 1 month. Okay, last 30 days data to provide you the exact. Otherwise, you can just do the load testing. Let's say you have 100 users, you do the load testing. The application team knows how to do the load testing, and based on the values, we will just recommend the size. See, end of the day, what your load testing, or what your test that application team is going to give you is how much CPU is being utilized, how much RAM is being utilized. The other factors are disk side. What will be the what is the throughput is being utilized, what is the IOPS is being utilized. Based on those things, we are going to specify, recommend the size. Even in case somebody asks you, you can explain the same thing, right? You cannot give the direct answer. Okay, go for DS2v2. No. Got it?
Yep, got it. Thank you, Kamal.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm good from my side. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Karthik. Venu and Raj. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, for the people who are watching this video. Then we'll connect in the next video. All right.